I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Amrit Kumar, the president of Zilliqa. Amrit, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you very much for inviting me over.
You're very welcome. I'm very excited to hear a little bit about Zilliqa today. First of all, if you would, give us the problems that Zilliqa is solving in the blockchain industry from a general overview.
Yeah. So we are solving two basic problems. One is scalability. So this is something that we all know about right now, that popular blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they do not scale very well. So the number of transactions that they can process is around 5 to 10 on average. So this is one very big problem that the blockchain industry has to solve if blockchains ever get adopted in some form. So that's one basic problem that Zilliqa solves. The other problem that we identified lately was around smart contracts. So we felt that smart contracts, the way they are deployed today, especially in Solidity, which is the most popular language to code smart contracts, is not very secure language. It's not very safe language. And this is why we have seen incidents like DAO, like Parity, and a bunch of other attacks that has happened in the past with Solidity smart contracts. So we decided to build a new safe smart contract language, which could hold funds for developers, and they could have peace of mind.
Very interesting, Amrit. And I'd love to touch a little bit further on the scalability. You mentioned Bitcoin and Ethereum, they have a lot of scalability issues. What is specifically, limiting those blockchains from scaling, and what has Zilliqa done to scale more than that? And what is the current scalability right now? And are you continuing to grow that?
Yeah. So if you look at the way blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum work, so from an end user's perspective, you can create a transaction, you send the transaction to the network, and then the network may have, let's say, 10,000 of nodes, and each single one of them will process your transaction. So it's very secure, very decentralized, but it's also very redundant in some form. So because imagine, 10,000 nodes running a single $1 transaction. It's not very optimized in some form. And this is where we decided to employ an idea called sharding, where at a high level, what you do is you take your initial network, which is, let's say, of 10,000 nodes, you divide them into smaller subgroups. So each subgroup could contain, let's say, 1,000 nodes in it, so that each subgroup could process transactions in parallel to other groups. So what you're trying to do is basically a divide and conquer approach. So you're dividing the network and you're allowing the network to process things in parallel. Mm-hmm. So this is a radically different approach to what Bitcoin and Ethereum are doing right now.
Mm-hmm. But in the competitive landscape, I believe Ethereum is looking at doing something similar to sharding, and everyone really is battling for scalability. So it's sort of a race to who can do it first. And is the scalability alone a unique selling proposition once all of these blockchains are scalable enough?
So if you look at Zilliqa's in this perspective, so we were the first one to employ and implement sharding for a real network. And it's actually pretty live right now. You can send transactions, you can process smart contracts. So we are way ahead in the game compared to many other blockchains who are exploring sharding or actually implementing sharding in some form, including Ethereum for that matter. If you compare Ethereum, particularly with Zilliqa, the difference is that Ethereum is already a built-in infrastructure. People are actually using it. So making changes to an infrastructure that's already there, it's like changing your foundations, your building is already up. So there's a very big difference, and we have this advantage and liberty to make changes, or make improvements, and so on. Mm-hmm. The other thing I feel is that since we have implemented the first version of sharding, we also have the liberty to improve it now, while most of the projects are still exploring how to build the first version of sharding. Now, as you asked about, the second proposition, which is around smart contract language, I feel, every other day, recently we heard about the 0x incident where, there was a vulnerability that was found in the contract. We feel that it cannot go on like this. Someone has to do something. We have to develop a new language. We have to convince the developer crowd that this is the right language to use, and the language that we have developed called Scala is the right language to develop smart contracts that are mission critical.
Very interesting. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about your development team and maybe your leadership team. What's the size of your team right now, and are you growing?
So yeah, we have around, let's say, 25 team members in the team spread over all sorts of countries, including Denmark, Russia, India, China, all sorts of places. And we have two or three leadership teams. So where we have myself, president. So I take a look at the normal operations of the company. and the business and other directions. We have CTO, and we also have a marketing head, and the rest are mostly developers. So we have a 5-member marketing and business team, and the rest are engineers, developers, and researchers.
Very interesting. That's very development heavy. And when did you first start developing Zilliqa, and have you hit all the targets on the roadmap, and how is it going?
Yeah, so we first published our white paper in August 2017, so it's roughly around 2 years now. We finished our first mainnet in January this year. That mainnet, didn't allow you to send transactions directly because we wanted to go with a staggered approach to blockchain development, where we felt that. So we are using proof of work for Sybil resistance, and we felt that proof of work has been attacked recently, especially with new blockchains where hash rate was not that high. So we felt that it'd be better if we push out features in a kind of a staggered way. And January, we released the first version of the mainnet, and a couple of weeks ago, we released the final version of the mainnet that allows people to develop smart contracts. So we are on the roadmap, right there.
Very interesting. And do you foresee moving forward the team still being very development heavy and having a very light marketing and business development team?
No, so we are going to change our strategy from now on. We already have developed something that's working right now. We, of course, will have to make improvements, and 6 to 8 months we'll continue on working on adding new features, making improvements, making the protocol more robust. But I think it's this time where we have to push our pedal on marketing and business. We have to convince the crowd that this is the right platform to build on, and engage very heavily with developers so that we can build a proper developer community right now. So this is going to be the focus for us for the next 6 to 8 months.
And how important would you say the user experience and the developer experience is? Because a lot of blockchain companies are very tech heavy, they sort of lack in that area, and that's when the customer acquisition and the growth of the company after the product has been developed is very important for that to flourish, right?
I completely agree with you. I feel that there are a lot of things blockchains do not offer that well to regular users. Just take as an example a simple address. An account address in a bank account would look like a bunch of numbers, but an account number on the blockchain side would look like a bunch of hexadecimal strings, which is very painful for normal users to understand. Even they don't understand what a 0x is when you say it in front of your address. So obviously, I think user experience and even developer experience has to be improved if we were to, if anyone was to adopt blockchain platforms in general. So I completely agree with you, and it's going to be a focus for us as well, especially for the development team as well, to make sure that we have all the tools and the features that may allow normal users to come and use the platform.
That's great. And is there a business model of any sense built into Zilliqa? I know you'll have dApps built on top of it, which will be running businesses, but how will the company itself sustain business moving forward?
At this stage, we don't have a proper built-in business model yet, but we are certainly exploring many different ways of bringing business for us, for Zilliqa as a company. But at this stage, it's the regular idea that we provide the platform and like an OS, like an operating system for you.
Definitely. Now, what challenges do you face or you foresee facing as you continue your growth?
So the challenge that we face, and I think it's a challenge that is common to any blockchain platform today, is adoption. You may have built the most, the fanciest blockchain and tech-heavy blockchain platform, but if you cannot convince people to come and use your platform, it's going to be very painful for you. This is an adoption challenge that everyone faces, and we are no exceptions. But we are looking into many different ways into pushing that adoption angle. So one is, of course, convincing individual developers who have cool ideas, but also at the same time working in parallel with industry players who have their existing businesses running live and are looking into pushing some of their businesses on top of a blockchain. So I think this two-fork approach is something that we are planning to push in the next 6 to 8 months.
Great. And with you creating your own programming language for this smart contracts, can also be seen as a barrier to entry for developers that want to develop on Zilliqa. What is the incentive to develop on Zilliqa rather than just doing it on Ethereum, where a lot of development's already happening?
Right. So there are the two ways in which we are going about it. One is, of course, it's the language offers an alternative. So I'm not saying that you should completely ditch your ditch your smart contract language that you're most familiar with. But if you're looking for a smart contract, if you're looking to build a smart contract that's going to store, let's say, $100 million in it, you should better look for better alternatives. And this is where in this our pitch to developers that take a look at it, see if this meets your security needs, and then go for it. Mm-hmm. The other incentive part is something that's also we are also looking at. So we have dedicated a pool of $5 million to encourage developers to come and come and try out things and see if they can. So if you have already built your Solidity contract, try and see if you can build a similar one on Zilliqa and see how it plays out in terms of security. So these are two different angles in which we are pitching to developers.
That's great. And how many developers or is there any dApps already built on Zilliqa right now?
So we have one very good application that is already built and running, which is on stoppable domains. So the idea is you don't want users to have and control and then memorize, let's say in some form, or store a hexadecimal character string as your address. You want them to use a very simple human readable address. So they are working on building a human readable address to replace regular account addresses. And there's one smart contract that's running right now on a platform. We are in touch with several other companies as well and individual projects for building and plan to build on Zilliqa very soon.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And what are your goals in terms of expansion right now? Is Zilliqa mainly looking for strategic partners, investors, customers, more team members, or developers?
I would say that we are looking in all directions. To be fair, and I think you cannot succeed if you're just focusing on one simple and one entity or one target group. So if you look at developers, we certainly are expanding very rapidly, both on the development side and also on the marketing and business side, because we realize that this is the time where you have to push the pedal on marketing and business adoption. So we are extensively hiring on that front. We're also looking at expanding our base to other countries. So we have recently set up an office in London, and we are trying to build our foot and a foothold in the European market as well. Up until now, our focus has mostly been in the Asian market, so we're expanding in that sense. We're also looking into different ways in which we could reach out to new investors and see if they would be interested in getting involved in Zilliqa in some form. So it's not that we are targeting just one crowd, but we are looking at in a more comprehensive manner.
That's amazing, Amrit. And in terms of major milestones, obviously the mainnet launching was a huge milestone. What's the next biggest thing that people will need to look for in Zilliqa?
I think the next biggest thing would be to look at dApps that will be built on our platform. So we already are working with a couple of companies. One company is called Xfist, so it's a fintech startup in Singapore, and they are helping different crypto exchanges to connect them with traditional banks or financial sectors. So we are working with them to see if they can build something or at least put a part of their backend on a blockchain infrastructure. And we have also working with a company called Mindshare, which is a company helping advertisers and publishers, and they're building some sort of let's say you could call it as a supply chain for advertising. So this is something that people should look out and see once they are live on the mainnet.
That's great. And how can people follow along, learn more information, and join the community?
So we have a very active Telegram community. We also have a Twitter handle. So if you want to know new updates on what we're doing, follow us on Twitter. You can also go and check our website. These are the different channels which you can use to learn more about us.
I'll leave those links in the description box below. That's all the time that we have today, Amrit, but it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you very much, Ashton. It was lovely being here.